If you tuned in to part 1 of our most recent Brew with Us, where we went to Cheltenham and visited DEYA, then today you're in for a treat, because Martin and I are going to be brewing up a batch of Dust My Brew.
What an amazing time we had in Cheltenham, visiting DEYA, getting behind those shutters and getting into the nuts and bolts with them. Bet you haven't stopped thinking about it, James, since that day.
Mate, I haven't. It was fantastic. It's somewhere that, shamefully, I've been meaning to get back to for a long time. What a reason to go back though, right? Working on one of our Brew With Us projects with them, getting behind the scenes, like you say, and seeing how that amazing brewery turns out, the quality of beer that it does. And it was, I say it was no surprise, but it was really refreshing to see that the thing that delivers their consistency and their quality is the team behind it, as well as the processes that they've worked on. But that idea of continual improvement really shone through.
Yeah, there's just a dedication to everything DEYA, but especially the beer.
Yeah.
They're just focused on making it the best they possibly can every time they brew it.
Detail, 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 right?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, you know, if you did stick around to the end of that video, you would have seen that I did have a go at brewing a batch of Dust My Broom, and I got pretty close, you know, actually in the tasting that we did with Nikki. She was incredibly complimentary about the beer, but that doesn't mean that we can't work on it and improve ourselves.
Well, there is so much secret sauce, as we call it, that we saw there, that I'm guessing you're going to throw some of that at it.
Yeah, now I think it's worth at this point, before we go into recipe detail, just talk through some of the things with the first batch that I did and how I'm planning to make some adjustments to the batch we're doing today. So the first batch that I brewed a 20 litre batch. So I finished with 20 litres worth of wort into the fermenter, and actually, because the dry hop on it was so big, I probably only got about 16 litres packaged into the keg.
Wow, that's a serious amount of loss.
Yeah, and you know, you do lose beer when you add a lot of hop matter. It is unavoidable, but to compensate for that, the batch that we're brewing today is going to be a 23 litre batch. So I've increased the malt, staying within the proportions that are used, you know, percentage wise, but just trying to increase the volume so that at the end of fermentation, we end up with much closer to a 19 litre keg.
Okay.
In the final package.
Well, I think this would have been a bit of a boring video if we just repeated what you did last time. So
yeah.
It's good to experiment and try a few new things to just refine it and refine it.
There are some things that we didn't go into detail in the video that we're going to expand on today, specifically around some of the techniques, yeast especially, because that was something that stood out when we were talking to Connor about kind of their yeast characteristics and what their house yeast comprises of, because it's not a commercially available strain. So we've had to come up with some ideas on how to replicate the yeast character that they get in their beers.
Boom, as if by magic.
I've got my brew sheet, but I've also got a copy of DEYA's brew sheet that Gareth, their head brewer, sent me in advance to it. So I'll be referring to a couple of different things. Now, what's the same is the proportions of malt we're going to be using. So our base malt, we're going to be using 70% of. We are changing the malt from the malt that DEYA use. Now, normally we would stay really true to the malt that they use, that any brewery uses, if we've got access to it. They use Simpson's extra pale malt, which we do have access to.
Yeah.
But we know that on a homebrew scale, we can pick up more colour in our smaller vessels due to the boil.
Well, we saw that on batch 1. There was slight darkness, but also in previous breweries we visited, we've seen, like, even the Jaipur batch I did, which was exactly the same, came out slightly darker.
It did. So to try and preserve that same really bright, juicy colour that we saw in the real version of Dust My Broom, we switched the base malt out to Munton's Super Pale. Simpson's Extra Pale, I think, has an EBC of 3.5, so it's still really low colour. Munton's Super Pale is 2.5, so it's another step down. That means that we can try and compensate for some of the colour differential that we might see on a homebrew batch.
Okay.
Everything else we're keeping the same. So we've got 70% of that base malt. Then we've got 18% of our jumbo oats. which we know are very similar to the oats that are being used by DEYA. We're using pale wheat malt at 10%, and then we're using Caragold at 2%. Okay, now Elliot was talking about how they use a really light caramel malt just to add a little bit of more malty character to the beer. So we're going with Caragold.
So what OG are you aiming for, James?
So DEYA aim for 1062 on this beer, which is exactly what we're targeting. We've got worked it out roughly at about 78% efficiency. Our final gravity, so DEYA target a final gravity of 1018. And again, that's kind of where we're aiming and where I ended up with the first batch as well. That means we'll end up with an ABV of around about 5.8%, between 5.8 5.9, which again is within spec for the beer that they're producing. To achieve that, we're going to be mashing at 70, okay? And we're going to be doing a 60-minute mash, all right? Just to make sure we get that full conversion of all the grains.
So then after the mash, you're obviously going to go into the boil. How long is that going to be?
Previous batch, I boiled for a full 60 minutes. And again, we saw that color just ever so slightly change. So we're not going to be boiling for a full 60 minutes. We're going to do a 45-minute boil on this batch, okay? Now, there's no hop additions in the boil whatsoever. Every bit of bitterness we're going to be picking up from our Whirlpool additions. So once we've hit the end of the boil, we're going to chill to 80 and then move on to Whirlpool. DEYA don't see any temperature drop in their Whirlpool, okay?
They said it's not a heated vessel.
Yeah, so we're gonna maintain the temperature in hours, because we do know that you can lose, especially over a slightly longer Whirlpool period, sometimes 15 degrees worth of heat. So we're going to maintain the temperature using the temperature controller on our grain father. We're going to be brewing on a G40 today, because again, because you've got a fairly hefty Whirlpool in there, and we can get the Whirlpool arm fitted, keep it spinning the whole time.
Yeah.
That will help us pick up the necessary IBUs that are required for the beer.
What are you talking about in terms of bitterness? What are they targeting?
Okay, well, I'm just going to refer to my other brew sheet. So actually their target IBUs for their wort is probably a bit higher than maybe people would expect for this kind of beer. They're aiming for 53. Now they do that because their yeast does strip out quite a bit of the bitterness in the finished glass. So their target IBU for the finished beer is actually 30 IBUs. I'm aiming for around about 20-ish IBUs based on the Grainfather software, calculating it with the Whirlpool. Again, that's what I did previously, and there was no discernible difference between the bitterness. There was a slightly different profile within the bitterness.
Yeah.
Ours was a bit more pithy, theirs was a bit brighter and zingier, but I'm happy with how bitter the beer was, okay?
So James, what are those Whirlpool additions that you're putting in there?
Yeah, okay, so if you watch that first video, you'll notice that they are using some liquid hop products in the Whirlpool. They, on the batch that we were there for, had Simcoe, Chinook and Strata going in on the Whirlpool. The recipe that I brewed, I didn't add the Strata into the Whirlpool. We kept that for dry hop, which we'll come on to later. So we're going in with 160 grams worth of Simcoe and 23 grams worth of Chinook. The Chinook is an interesting one because they have that ability to go and select the Chinook that they want and look for the profile within it that they want. They're looking for grapefruit, you know, citrusy notes from their Chinook.
Rather than the dank stuff.
Yeah, the sort of more sappy, resinous character that you can get from Chinook. Now, we don't have the luxury of being able to go over to Oregon and select Chinook that we would like. What I am trying to do is use technique and also a specific product. So we have the Chinook from Bathhouse, which is the pure hop pellet, formerly BBC.
Yeah.
So it's a more enriched version of Chinook that does express some of that more citrusy character, but it also is still kind of classically Chinook. So what I'm trying to do with it is, and what I did on the first batch that I felt worked really well, is we're going for a 45-minute Whirlpool before we transfer into our fermenter to try and help us replicate that contact time that DEYA get, and it's something we do regularly here on our homebrew batches versus commercial beers. We're going in with all the Simcoe at the beginning, and then the Chinook we're only adding for the last 15 minutes of the Whirlpool.
Right, okay.
All right, with a view to try and extract some of the lighter aromatics from the Chinook and not impart too much in the way of resiny dankness. And again, I felt that went well with the batch that we took with us. There was some kind of grapefruity character in there, which I think in part was down to the approach that I took with that Whirlpool.
Okay, so you're finished in Whirlpool. You're going to chill it down.
Yeah.
What are you fermenting in?
So we're going to be brewing this in a Firmzilla, okay, because I know that I can do completely low oxygen brewing in there. Really good for dry hopping, really good for rousing hops as well.
How are you going to manage the temperature?
We're going to use the wrapped fermentation chamber for this. I'm going to use a wrapped pill in there as well to monitor gravities and temperatures, and actually I'm away for a few days, so I'll be able to log on via my phone and adjust things as needs be and monitor the fermentation. Yeast though, now this is an interesting one. DEYA's yeast is a kind of house strain, although it kind of is two strains.
They said it's like Vermont and London ale kind of combined, so how are you going to do that?
Well, we've got a few options available to us. There are a lot of yeasts that we can combine together to do that. You could use, for example, London Ale 3 or London Fog in liquid form, combine that with the Tropic Ale yeast strain from White Labs. Those could work if you were interested in looking at a liquid yeast option. The yeasts that I used in the first batch though, I'm not changing, I'm staying with that, and I'm using two different dry yeasts. I'm using WHC Haze Heaven because that is a kind of London Fog, high glycerol, going to give us all of the kind of extra texture that we want from that yeast strain.
Yeah, we've both had some brilliant beers made with that.
Yeah. The other yeast I'm going to use is the Lallemand New England strain because that is a Vermont strain, okay? Now, normally you would have to pitch 2 packets of that into a batch. We're going to pitch 1 because we've got another yeast in there as well that's doing some of the heavy lifting in terms of the fermentation. That worked really, really well. Fermentation kicked off quickly, it was done quickly, and the yeast character, I felt, was really quite akin to what you get from a DEYA beer.
Yeah, the bit I got to taste, it tasted very close. So you're going to pitch them both at the same time?
Yeah, both at the same time.
Okay.
We're going to hit the fermenter around about 18, 19 degrees. We're going to hold temperature at that for the first 24 hours or so. Then I'm going to ramp it up slowly to sort of 21 over a couple of days. After we're kind of at the midpoint in fermentation, I'm going to set it to 24. And I'm going to let the temperature rise to 24, hold it there until fermentation's complete and we pass a forced acetal test.
So are you going to put anything like ALDC or clarity in there, or?
I'm not going to put ALDC into the beer when we pitch the yeast. I will add some when we do dry hop, just as a belt and braces approach. And that kind of leads on nicely to dry hop. And one of the reasons why I'm going to do that, again, DEYA use liquid hop products that are not available in Homebrew, in both the Whirlpool and in dry hop. We're going to be using entirely T90 hop pellets for our dry hop, and we're going to be dry hopping with Strata and Simcoe. Now, again, this is where I've made an adjustment to my first attempt. So my first attempt, I literally took the liquid quantities and converted them 1 for 1 into pellets.
Jesus, that would have been a lot of pellets.
It was.
At a lot of cost.
Yeah, it was. It was knocking on for 500 grams worth of pellets into a 20-litre batch.
Here's why you only got 16 litres.
Yeah, I think 16 is probably being generous as well. Because it was in a Firmzilla, I could see what was happening. And when you add all those pellets, you get like compaction. And I was able to rouse the hops, but actually, I wasn't able to blow all of the hop matter back up into suspension. So I had to take a little bit of a leaf out of our good friend Jacob from Jidler's Tipple.
Oh, his patented method?
Yeah, pick the Firmzilla up, shake it, get all the hops out of the collection vessel back into suspension. But even after doing that, very quickly you get compaction again. So I think there's probably diminishing returns. So I've actually trimmed the dry hop down a little bit. So we're going to be using 350 grams total, 355 grams, 55 grams of Strata and 300 grams of Simcoe, all right? I think that will allow us to rouse the hops more easily, hopefully prevent from me having to pick up the fermenter and shake it. Maybe not though, we'll see. We're going to increase our yield as well slightly by doing this. And I think we'll be able to extract enough out of that dry hop to still give us the character that we want in the finished beer.
And get a full keg.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that stands out in my memory of being at DEYA, those bright tanks, you know, they've got a couple that they're using for the normal batches, and then that giant one that they're using for steady. You going to do anything with this in terms of transferring this into a bright tank or an oxy bar?
Well, I didn't on the first batch. I may well do on this batch, but if I am, the one thing I'm going to do is fill whatever vessel we're going to transfer into with no rinse sanitizer to the brim and push all of that no rinse sanitizer out with gas, so that I have a completely guaranteed oxygen-free vessel to transfer beer into. Equally, when it comes to transferring it into the keg, whether I do the bright tank step or not, I will absolutely be doing that.
Now, the one thing that you haven't talked about yet, water.
We are going to be using the same approach that DEYA used to water. We've filtered all of our water that we're going to be using today using our RO filter. Right. We're going to be targeting around about 250 ppm of chloride, 125 of sulfate. That pushes the calcium quite high as well.
Have you had to fill some of the gaps from the information they've given you, or they shared
a little bit. You know, magnesium being the main one, but I've just aimed for like 5 ppm on magnesium, just so that I've got a little bit in there.
That's enough talk, James. I think we should just get on and brew this thing.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out at the end. And we've got some fresh cans to try it side by side, so stick around, join us after fermentation, and you'll get to see just how this beer turns out.
Service is a bit slow here, isn't it? Where's he got to?
Here we go, good sir.
Oh,
1 glass of beer for you. Is that what you ordered?
and some pork scratchings.
No, I haven't got any of those, sorry.
Oh.
But what we do have, Martin, is Dust My Broom.
Dust My Broom.
So my second attempt at brewing it that we did a couple of weeks ago, in a glass, ready to try. Okay, and we are going to do this side by side with the real thing. But before we do that, I'd really like us to dive into this version, talk through a few things, see what you think of it.
Okay. Sniff it first.
Yeah, let's go in for a smell. Man, what are you getting?
There's a big whack of like stone fruit there. You know, there's a slight citrusy hint, but it's like really delicate.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think, grapefruity again, which is what I was looking for. Now, I think looking back on some of the stuff we did, first and foremost, the dual yeast strains that we pitched. So the WHC Haze Heaven, co-pitched with the Lallemand New England, really drives a lot of that stone fruit character, I think, that's coming through on the aroma. Now, fermentation was like rapid on this as well.
Okay, how long did that take roughly?
To get down to final gravity was about 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, and I pitched it, like we said, about 18, 19 degrees, steadily ramping the temperature up. I was doing that remotely because I had it in the fermentation chamber and I was away for a few days.
So monitoring with the pill?
Yeah,
okay.
And that worked an absolute treat. Finished fermentation. I think this finished actually a little touch lower than I was aiming for. I wanted to finish about 10:18, I think it was 10:16. Still, that should leave plenty of body in the beer and the character that we're really looking for in this specific style. Now, just coming back to aroma, obviously we did the sort of 2-step Whirlpool where we added the Chinook secondary.
Yeah, you were leaving that till like the last 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, and that should hopefully have aided us in picking up some of that more citrusy character from the Chinook. So tell me if you think you can get that. Maybe that's what you're picking up.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting like a citrusy note. Yeah, and it's probably more grapefruity than orange or lemon, lime.
But there is also tons of sort of tropical fruit, you know, mango, that kind of thing going on in there, isn't there? It's stone fruit, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about dry hop because, you know, if I think back to the first batch that I did, I only got, I think, probably 15 litres. 16 I said earlier, that was probably being a bit generous.
Yeah.
Probably about 15 litres into the keg, so extended the actual overall batch size to 23 litres, and
that was done with extra malt?
Yeah, just dialed up the malt to match the batch size, and then slightly reduced the dry hop.
That was down from what, 500 down to something more like 300?
It was about 350.
Okay.
Yeah, with the strata that went in as well. I still didn't get a full keg.
Okay.
I got much closer to a full keg.
Where'd you get to?
I think it was about 18 litres.
Okay, that's all right. So, that's a weekend's work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I do think that you could probably get more as well, but I didn't want to actually take the hops off the beer. I wanted to do what DEYA do, which is transfer the beer off the hops, which is what I did. I went straight into a keg, a purged keg that I'd filled with sanitizer. And like I said, I've got about 18 litres in the keg. So yeah, I think I picked up a good 2 to 3 litres extra by using that those slight amendments. And I don't think it's compromised the appearance of the beer whatsoever.
On the previous batch, you talked about rousing it not being effective and having to do the Jacobs method.
Yeah, the picking up and shaking it.
Did you have to do that this time?
Nope. Didn't have to do that. I was able to blow CO2 through the bottom. I did it after about 45 minutes of adding the hops in, just because that initial settling, where you've still got sort of whole pellets, I wanted to blast them back up, which I did, and then I did it 2 more times, one at the end of that day and then one the following morning. Each time I was able to really ramp the CO2 through the collection chamber at the bottom of the Firmzilla and blast all the hops back into suspension. You've been very patient.
I know. I put it down because the temptation's just too strong.
Yeah. First off, what do you think of the colour?
I think the colour looks great. You know, we're going to do the true test of what the colour is like against the can.
Changes made a difference, yeah. So, going for a taste?
Definitely.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. It's very, very similar to the first batch that I brewed. And bearing in mind that I reduced the dry hop on this, I'm really pleased with that.
I think it's better than the first one. I think the first one was much more green. I think you've taken a lot more care and time over this to get this right and dial it in. Which, you know, that's what DEYA do.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good point. This has had a whole week sat in the keg after being carbonated, literally just sat in the fridge, chilling out, doing nothing before I hooked it up to a tap this morning. So yeah, I think you're right. It is a bit cleaner, maybe.
I think it's got a slight more softness and pillariness to the mouthfeel on it. Just feels more together rather than like slappy around the chops.
Yeah. I mean, there's still plenty of bitterness in the beer as well, which is really good, because that's something that's difficult to really know where you're going to end up when you're only adding hops into the Whirlpool. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how much bitterness there is there, but it is well balanced with the malt. There is a pleasant malty character to it, but it is all about Simcoe. You know, that's the big thing that shines for me.
You better go and get that can.
Here we go.
Stick it in the fridge over there.
All right. I'm back with your next drink order, Mr. Rake.
Still no pork scratchings?
No, sorry, no pork scratchings. Right.
Before you open that, I'd just like to add, this is the batch they brewed when we were there. And I went big on the order of it, and everyone's been lapping it up at home. So, you know, this is going to be a true test.
Yeah, well, the reason that they're lapping it up, Martin, is because you added the Whirlpool hops. You actually had a hand in brewing this beer.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's stack them up then. Take a look at that colour. Oh, this is interesting. I think that's closer. I'm really pleased with that. That trim down on the boil, I think that's really helped.
If anything, yours might be just slightly lighter, but it's like marginal.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Right, come on then. Let's go in, have a smell. Start with ours. Oh, I'm still getting loads of like pithy, citrus, grapefruit character there, which is great. Let's go in for the real thing.
I think it's slightly more tropical.
Yeah.
And I'm almost getting like a slight whiff of pineapple off it.
You can tell that they're of the same kin, right?
God, yeah, definitely visually. And, you know, on the aroma, so close.
Right, come on, let's go in for a taste. Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that was awkward.
You go with, I'm going
with the real
all right,
thing.
refresh of the... I'm going refresh of yours first.
See, I think ours has got more body and mouthfeel to it.
So maybe slightly, a little bit more spritzy.
Yeah.
I think you're probably being more critical on it than I am because you're asking me the questions, but it's marginal. They are so similar and so close.
Well, I'm really pleased with how that's turned out, Martin. And actually, the one thing that I'm really pleased with is that the changes we made to increase our yield, keep the colour low, those two things have really paid off. And, you know, the colour is the big thing for me, and yeah, getting a few more litres in the keg as well.
Yeah, and you know, you've also helped bring the cost down, make it a lot more affordable so that everyone can have a go at it.
Yeah, I mean, stripping out 100 grams worth of hops is a big deal.
It's not had a huge impact on the final finished beer.
No.
Is that it done? Can I go back to my desk with these? These are really nice.
You can. But before we do that, if you've got any questions about our approach to brewing Dust My Broom by DEYA, please drop them down in the comments section below. Either myself or Martin will come back to you. We'd love to hear what you've got to say. Also, we'd like to hear your thoughts on any of the techniques that we've used throughout this process. Now, if you have not already grabbed a kit for Dust My Broom, I suggest you do, and some cans of Dust My Broom that Martin added the Whirlpool hops for, because he's very proud of that. And try them side by side, brew it, get on it, have a go, and see what you might do next time you have a go at brewing this beer, or indeed another beer in this style, because I think that's the big thing for me. When we go to these breweries, yeah, we get a recipe, but we learn about techniques that they're using for many of their beer styles, and in this case the signature style for DEYA, which is a big juicy hazy pale ale.
I think that really jumps out on this kit, and the approach you've taken to it. You've got the sheet, but you've not fully followed it. You know, we're learning more and more about that. It's not just simply take the sheet, scale down. There's so much more you have to kind of adjust within there.
Absolutely.
To get such a great finished result as like Dust My Broom with your own version of Dust My Broom.
Really proud, mate. Really proud.
So you should be.
Chin chin.
Chin chin.
Now, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and make sure that you give this video a thumbs up. And if you'd like to keep up to date with everything we're doing here at Malt Miller HQ, check us out over on all of our social channels, and you can sign up to our newsletter in the link down below in the description. Right, we're going to go and try and do some more work.
I think I'm going to go and finish these and try and find a bag of pork scratchings.
All right, cool. Well, cheers. Have a great brew.
Cheers.